As we continue through the offseason, the hottest piece of news might be a little bone nobody's ever heard of, the Hamate bone. What is it, and why is it affecting so many different people? We've got some hot moves in the MLB and a discussion on park factors that maybe some people really aren't thinking about. It's This Week in Baseball. And so as we kind of come in, we have even more, as now Francisco Lindor and I believe Jackson Holliday, and I think even Corbin Carroll now
All three
have
of
all
them,
come
right?
down with a strange injury no one's ever really heard of in their Hamate bone on their hand.
Wait. Time out. How do you say that word?
Hamate?
That's like, are you like doing Japanese or something like
I
that?
have no idea.
Okay.
Like.
It sounded better when you say it. But I don't,
Well,
I mean, I
is
think
it
it's,
Hamate?
yeah,
Hamate sounds.
hamate. I always heard it as
Hamate
hamate.
sounds.
Ha-
Okay, yeah, Hamate
Hamate,
sounds
yeah.
way better. Okay, that's
I like
my mistake.
hamate.
Hamate sounds way better. I'm sorry, everybody.
Anyway, we've heard about it in the past, but not three players, not being able to play.
Simultaneously all having the same injury.
Right.
And so it has left a lot of people going, what even is it? And so it's a little bone like right here on your hand, correct? Like on the bottom of your hand where your pinky is.
Right.
And so
It sits on top of the knob.
right. So that's why so many players are coming down with injuries is that the constant repetitive motion of swinging the bat, having the knob of the bat grinding against your hand creates stress fractures over time. And so eventually, especially on checked swings, eventually you're going to have an issue here. And so some of the players, the way they're doing it, they're just finding it easier to just remove the bone because it has poor blood flow. And then they just get it out of there and it's not a problem anymore.
Kind of like an appendix.
Right. It's part of the human body that only baseball players would ever run into this issue because nobody else is making this repetitive motion with something against it like this other than baseball players.
Now we're not going so far as to say like with pitchers and wanting to get the the UCL.
No, this
done.
is much. I don't think you're going to see guys getting preemptive hamate bone surgery, but
Yeah. But it's interesting in the case of Lindor, who's a switch hitter, I thought, okay, so batting left-handed, his right hand would be on the bottom there. And it's better for him than the other two players because they did it to their dominant hand so that it affects their throwing. Where in Lindor's case, it's his left hand, so he's not throwing with it. So that's why I think his schedule might be a little different than the other guys. But when he bats right-handed, his left hand will be on the bottom of that. So that is a thing. Maybe he only bats left-handed for the first month or two. I don't know. We've seen guys like Alvarez on the Mets have that same sense, and it takes a while sometimes for the power and the swing to come back.
Right, it's going to be interesting to see how he's affected this year offensively due to this recovery. Obviously, it's something that has to happen. I have to think it affected him last year. And it's hard to not think that it was, because if it didn't affect him, he wouldn't be getting the surgery.
Right. And they seem so sure that the Mets are like, oh yeah, he's going to be fine. Have the surgery. They would like no question about doing it.
Right. There was never a moment where they ever not thought about doing the surgery, it seemed like. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how all three of them recover. I think that it's just pure coincidence that two of them are shortstops.
So now you know everything you want to know about the hamate or the Hamate bone, which I like much better.
Right, that might come out. And then obviously we did have some moves. We had probably, I guess, the spiciest move of the week, if you want to say it, with the Phillies unceremoniously releasing Nick Castellanos for him to now get signed by the Padres in a whirlwind of activity there. And that's a move that I don't think moves the needle for either team, and I think is more talked about because of the optics behind the move than anything else. Because if we're being realistic, especially Philly fans and Padre fans, both of them would admit this is not going to be the difference between either team winning or losing the World Series.
Well, it's interesting on a veteran Padre team. I guess they're a veteran team, wouldn't you say?
I think they're one of the older teams in the MLB, so yeah.
Bringing in a guy like Castellanos, and so is this a good clubhouse guy or a bad clubhouse guy? And he kind of got saddled when he was in the dugout after he got pulled from the lineup with a beer, and that whole story that we all read about last week. That tarnished, and we were talking about that off air last week. Going, so who signs this guy? Because is he a cancer?
The Padres are the type of team that makes sense to me to sign. Because if you're the Padres, you have a veteran clubhouse. You're not worried about him messing with the mojo of a young team. You know what I mean? You're not going to worry about bringing him in and having him be like, "Ooh, wait, is that the kind of influence we want around our plucky young upstart team that's trying to push?" The Padres are thinking, "Okay, yeah, everybody here knows their business. We're bringing Castellanos, and we hope that he continues to be a professional and he has a bounce back offensive season, and we get a player on the cheap. And if it doesn't work, our clubhouse will be able to more easily withstand a malcontent until we can get rid of him."
And I pulled up, looks like, okay, so, remember Castellanos kind of came out of nowhere and was like, wow, this guy's a pretty good player. At least that's how it struck me, from what was a modest start. So he hit 20 homers 6 times, was an all-star for the Reds in 2021. I didn't even think he was also an all-star in 2023. But in 21, he batted .309 with 34 homers and 100 RBIs for the Reds. That's when I thought, wow, this guy's is a real player. And with the Phillies, when he was an all-star in 23, he batted .272 with 29 homers.
He's never really had another season quite that good again.
Not quite like 2021, but
right.
Everything's been on the downside since then. And I think you and I would say, watching him defensively, I'm sure Philly fans would was a little bit like nervous time every time the ball went out there.
Right. And I'm sure that the Padres are going to be hoping that they can mostly DH him, because you're probably not thrilled about the idea of going and sticking him out in the outfield every day. That's a rough defensive, thing to do to your team, to have him out there.
And they also added the Padres, you mentioned, to their pitching, and 2 pitchers that have had kind of different kinds of careers, because German Marquez, who was most recently with the Rockies, where I think he's been a Rocky his whole career for the most part, always struck me as, man, this guy has talent, he just can never stay on the field. And Griffin Canning, who kind of had a good year, half a year last year for the Mets before he left with an Achilles injury, so you don't know what's going to happen there. These are just guys for extra arms in the bullpen.
Right. You need innings, and it's on interesting discussions. People were out there talking about, who do you think is the first person to get DFA from your team? And if for every team it's some random pitcher, because teams are just going to churn pitchers for innings, and that's what you saw. Like Verlander goes to the Tigers now, and that's as much a move for innings as is anything else. Because the Tigers are probably not thinking about, we need Justin Verlander for October innings. They're thinking, we need Justin Verlander for April and May innings.
Well, they lost Reese Olson for the season, so they are trying to fill out the back end of that rotation.
Right, he made 29 starts last year, so it wasn't like he didn't pitch a decent amount. So you're hoping he can give you at least 20, probably, if you're the Tigers. If you could get that out of him, that'd be great, I imagine.
And he was, because it's Verlander, to say he was pretty good, is like he wasn't good for Verlander, but he was good for a major league pitcher. How about that?
Right, especially one of his age.
Right, exactly. And a couple of other news notes, that were sort of the top things. We've been talking about the Pirates and the fact that they had such a lack of power last year, 31 homers fewer than any other major league team. So they went out and signed Marcell Ozuna, who I think he only hit 19 homers last year. Or 21. 21 last year, yeah. And not necessarily known. I don't know. Is it fair to say as a fantastic clubhouse guy, or maybe I just don't know?
I think anybody that's been in the legal situations that Ozuna in, I'm going to have trouble calling a fantastic clubhouse presence.
I didn't say fantastic clubhouse guy. I meant that, but is he a good? Does that impact your ability to be a good clubhouse guy? It shouldn't.
It impacts my ability to judge him. You know what? Part of me would hope it does.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would hope the other players in the MLB would always, there's a little bit in the back of your mind when you're looking at it.
Don't embarrass us.
Right, exactly. Like, it should bother you on some level. So I would kind of hope so. I think for the Pirates' sake, they're probably hoping it doesn't and he can just shut up and play.
Just hit homers.
I think probably there's a concerning thing about a guy that had a down power year last year, and now he's going to Pittsburgh, because we'll talk about this in a little bit. But Pittsburgh is a nightmarish place to try and hit home runs. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And they weren't the only team in the NL Central making moves, because the Brewers traded their rookie third baseman, now going into his second year, Caleb Durbin, to the Red Sox. Durbin to get some pitchers. They got Kyle Hamilton and some other players back. And now you've got Duran and Duran, which is just going to be a fun thing. But I thought that move strange from the Brewers.
I do too, because Durbin was, I think, third in the NL's Rookie of the Year
Yeah.
race last year, and we watched him against the Mets, and he was very good when he played against the Mets.
So why sell on him early?
Well, and the Red Sox desperately needed an infielder. So for them, I think I love the deal. Kyle Hamilton was a guy who I was very high on a few years ago for San Francisco, has done nothing to warrant being high on him since then, to be honest. So I don't know what Milwaukee was thinking.
Right, and obviously because the Red Sox then needed, a new, they weren't done with their infield. They went out to get another one in Isaiah Kiner Falefa, which that's the needle mover there move for the Red Sox, and Boston fans out there.
Hey, he's gonna try to make the team somehow. I just saw that their teammate Roman Anthony was just added to the World Baseball Classic roster, and boy, seldom has a guy had like 60 games in the major leagues before he got injured. Maybe he was a little, give or take, more than that. He got the big contract, right? Like 160 million for 8 years or something like that. And he's on the WBC. He hasn't played 100 major league games.
Right. And it's, I mean, we have every reason to expect Roman Anthony to be a fantastic
Absolutely.
player.
I feel
But
the same way.
there are things that exist about his profile right now that you have to go, well, if he doesn't correct that, it's concerning. Because you look at him, he had the highest ground ball rate in the MLB last year when he was playing. Now, obviously, you expect him to learn how to elevate the ball. He's a kid, obviously. But if he doesn't, that's a problem. You can't ground ball rate. Ground balls are a bad thing in the major leagues because if you hit 110-mile-an-hour ground ball, you know what that is a lot of the time? I just
Yeah,
feel
well,
like
you went through that last week in your
right.
O'Neill Cruz discussion.
Right.
So
Durbin
that's the counterpart in the American League here.
Right, he's his counterpart. Now we expect him to fix that, but it's interesting to see how quickly everybody's ready to just be like, "Oh my God, he's a superstar," and I expect him to have a great year this year because he was trending that way last year before he got injured again. I guess that's the other thing that could keep him from being great is he just gets hurt all the time.
Well, I mean, certainly that was sort of I want to say a freak injury, but an injury that had never happened to him before. So I tend to think it's going to be an injury that hopefully is just, a little radar
There are
blip when
some
you look
guys
back
that
on it 8
always
years from now.
True, but there are some guys that always seem to have injuries that you've never seen happen before. Like there's some players that just, for whatever reason, they
Like
find
Chris
a way
Bryant?
Right. I think Chris Bryant just likes being on the injured list.
I mean, it's just, I don't know why.
That's how you know it's baseball. Like the groundhog. Baseball season has started when Chris Bryant returns to the injured list.
I don't want to get off on a Chris Bryant thing, but I think I saw something that just sort of said the amount of games he's played since he signed that contract, and the contract that he got are about as far apart as ever happened in a free agent.
The National League version of Anthony Rendon.
Yeah, well, I don't want to put him in that context because I think actually that Brian actually wants to play.
Right. That's a fun game for everybody but Angel and Rocky fans to think is who is the worst contract, Anthony Rendon or Chris Bryant? The two nightmare third base contracts of the 2000s. Each one is brutal when you look at it.
No doubt, very, very awful. We saw that we mentioned that Gallen, or we didn't mention that Zach Gallen finally signed. So I had a list of free agents that were still on the board, and Gallen, I guess, gambled for the longer contract and ended up taking a 1-year, $22 million deal or something like that, which I don't know. I guess that's good.
You know what? But the same way we were talking about, if Gallen can then spin that into a 3 or 4 year deal next year, he gets the 5 years he wanted, and he might get more money.
And all the pitchers are becoming quite aware with Framber doing what he did that unless your name is Scooble or Skeens, the likelihood of you getting a 7-year deal is probably less now that it's been in a long, long time.
Right. And if you're Lucas Giolito, you're now at this point, you're probably the best free agent left on the market. You're just hoping to get a deal at this point. You're probably thinking, I'd take 3 years just to have job security for the next couple of years. Because you don't want to be going through this every offseason, because the moment you have a bad year, then signing another deal gets even harder.
I tend to think the guys that are left, Giolito, you mentioned, Zach Littell was 37. Max Scherzer hasn't signed. Michael Kopech, the annual Michael Kopech signing. The point is that I don't think any one of those guys is going to get more than a 1-year deal.
Right. Maybe some team, the only way they get more than a 1-year deal is they're willing to sign a deal for cheaper and go play somewhere they probably don't want to play.
With all kinds of options.
Right. If you're Giolito and they were like, and Chicago comes up to you and goes, yeah, we'll pay you 3 for 45 with an opt out after the second year, you might take that.
Right. Yeah, I think
Because even though you wanted to get paid 18 a year or you were looking for 5 years, a deal was better than no deal.
and I think you worried particularly with a guy like you're going to give Max Scherzer a 2-year deal at age 41. I mean, why?
I think if you're Max Scherzer and you're looking for a 2-year deal, you're crazy. If Max Scherzer was turning down 1-year deals because he wanted a 2-year deal, I think he's being silly. Because
my sense with Max is, yeah, all right. And my sense with him is he's looking, like, where do I want to go?
Right. Who am I willing to go check up with for a year?
I want to pitch, and I want him to have a chance if everything goes well. Right. So again, it's not the Rockies. It's not going to be the Nationals.
Right. It's got to be a team that's in contention.
Sort of, even if it's peripherally.
Right.
I don't think it'd be the Reds. I don't think he would believe.
They'd be the Pirates.
Yeah. Or back to the Diamondbacks. He's been there before.
Right.
I could see that.
It's got to be a team like the Blue Jays or the Orioles. I don't think he'll come back to the Mets because I just don't see that happening.
No, that ship has sailed as far.
Maybe he goes to the Astros again or the Mariners.
Yep. Speaking of the Mets, I watched this week, and it's fun when you're in this time of year because spring training games I think start coming up in a this weekend or next week, the 20th or something like that are the first games. But you're watching guys work out in camp, and I'm watching Polanco scooping balls at first base. I'm watching
everybody's in the best shape of their life.
Bichette, throwing it and turning it and so on. And
hitting home runs off of Freddie Peralta.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so, it's just guys getting into shape. I know Hojo, Howard Johnson, who played, people might forget this, Hojo played some shortstop for the Mets in 86 and around that time. And he had already been a third baseman. He doesn't feel that Bichette is going to have any problem going to third base. Now, I would say the level of Hojo at shortstop is probably comparable to the level of Bichette. So it's not like...
Or, what at least guy would be able to say whether or not he'd be able to do it then?
Yeah, if I was an average or not shortstop and I moved to third base, it wasn't so hard,
Right. But I mean, the same way we saw Garrett Cole in the bullpen throw in 96 in spring training here. It's spring training. We're really not going to know what any of these guys are capable of until we get into the actual games. Because even if we see Bo Bichette and Jorge Polanco looking great at their respective positions in spring training, it's just not the same.
Yeah. Give it at least 40 games, a quarter of the season before you start.
Right. And then we'll start knowing.
Yeah, this isn't as bad as I thought. And you see Cole hitting 96 in the bullpen, and I saw AJ Minter for the Mets, coming back from surgery. He was firing it beautifully, and it's like, oh, he's going to come back early. No. These pitchers in particular, and somebody, our friend Mark Stevens was sort of posing, why is spring training so long? Why do they keep doing it? This kind of stuff. And I basically posed that the pitchers need the ability to build up. They probably need spring training more than any of the other players, simply just to be able to get to the point where they can tolerate throwing 5 or more innings in a game as a starter.
Right. They need this time to get their arms back into throwing shape because I think people that have never pitched don't understand the fall off in your arm, even taking like a month off. In terms of the strength and the stamina that you lose from just taking a month off. Because I remember when that happened to me back going between high school and college and taking off a month and how that affected me. So I can't imagine. The pitchers, yes, you're able to throw bullpens and stuff, but it's not the same. You're not able to simulate game intensity without games. And so you're not going to have the experience in December throwing what it's like throwing your 89th pitch in the 6th inning against somebody. It just can't.
And, you're trying to stretch these guys out, if you will, or how do you want to do it? And you've got the WBC in there, which is going to be interesting because you're going to have players that aren't in the WBC playing spring training games with a lot of players on the field, even fewer players on the field than that would be major league caliber players, since they're all going to be in the WBC.
Right. Now, the WBC, I think, is going to be interesting because I think what you're going to see is WBC is going to lead to certain pitchers coming out of the gate really hot and then falling off because it's going to supercharge their ramp-up period. And so they're going to come in at the beginning of the season way closer to mid-season form than they normally do, especially in comparison to the batters that don't go to the WBC. But then because they pitched a whole bunch early, when they get into the later part of the season, I bet they're going to fall off a little bit. And I would be really curious to see if we track some of these pitchers, especially the guys that end up pitching the most, what we end up seeing from their performance this year.
Well, and then it's all about, Mark DeRosa, who's managing the U.S. team. I'm sure has been in close contact with every single team that's providing players to the WBC, particularly when pitchers are concerned, going, don't kill my pitchers.
I am sure DeRosa has gotten pitch quotas and pitch limits from all these pitchers in anything but probably the gold medal game. They're going to be like, hey, we're going to be really strict about this. In the gold medal game, if you need like 5 more, we'll probably tolerate
Go
it.
for it. Yeah. You're trying to win the darn thing. And some injuries in spring training already. I don't know that this happened in spring training, but the Braves' Spencer Schwellenbach, who was injured last year, still has elbow inflammation. I don't think he's due back for some time at this point.
Concerning.
Josh Hader has bicep. He's been injured a lot. He's got biceps inflammation. No turn. Anthony Santander, who didn't play much last year for Toronto, he's not going to play.
Toronto got crushed. Yeah. Toronto got Santander, shoulder surgery, 5 to 6 months out. Shane Bieber has the nightmare condition for all pitchers, which is forearm fatigue, because
wasn't that like a big signing when they signed him back, and now he's got
they signed him back, and now he's got forearm fatigue, which you have to be thinking as a Blue Jay fan, like, oh God, what is that actually going to mean for him? Then Bowden Francis, who you were hoping was finally going to be, coming back fully, Tommy John surgery, 12 to 18 months.
I was shocked at that, right? Because remember he had the 2 starts in a row where he almost threw a no-hitter in both of them, I think, last summer.
And it was like he looked like, and then it's just, okay, now he's just gone again.
12 to 18 months. I mean, what a blow.
Reese Olson is now going to miss, and this is probably why the Tigers felt, as we talked about, that they felt the need to go out and get Verlander, because he's going to have shoulder surgery and miss all of 2026. So that's a lot of, you're seeing pitcher injuries, and this is why teams need guys, and they need guys to just eat innings for them. And so I think what was interesting is the Mets actually did a really good job of finding ways to eat innings and steal games at the beginning of last year. It's just their pitching reinforcements never arrived. That's a big part about teams' ability to win now in the regular season, is how do we steal games early in the year with pitchers that will not be in our roster come October.
That first half of the Mets season, and we painfully remember as Met fans that the Mets had the best record in baseball at 45-24. Right before the Pete Alonso throw to Kodai Senga, and then everything kind of went south. But they had gotten, we mentioned Griffin Canning's name, and he was excellent for the Mets. Tyler McGill, the first couple months of the season, was very good. And so we were hoping that they were going to sustain the Mets until Manaea came back to being himself. And
Senga came back to being himself.
And which never happened.
Never. So I think that's interesting. And obviously the Mets are looking at changes, because they've announced a pretty big change, I think, for them this year, which is Juan Soto. Not that he's coming to New York, but now he's going to be playing left field instead of right field, which is a big change for the Mets, especially defensively, because he was not a good right fielder defensively. I think any Met fan will admit that.
And I don't know why it didn't cross my mind when Nimmo
he could do this. Like we never
Nimmo
talked
was
about
traded.
this as like a possibility.
Nimmo was traded, and I thought, well, that should have been the time immediately. Yes, Juan Soto's going to play left field next year. Why did it take all the way until mid-February?
Now for all of us to be like, oh yeah, he can do that. And
right, that's a good idea.
Right. Oh yeah. Soto doesn't he's actually got an okay arm, but it's like in terms of defensive pressure, right field is harder than left field. More so because generally when balls are hit to right field, they're hit with way more spin because they're coming off of the right-handed bat, so they're much harder to track off of the bat. Whereas you don't have to deal with that nearly as much in left field, so it's a much easier defensive position for him. And so now the Met outfield should hopefully be, and you're not now stacking a bad defender behind another potential bad defender. That was what was killing the Mets last year.
Is that they had about Polanco to right field.
Right, because that was what killed them last year. Is you had Soto in right field, Alonso at first, so you had one of the worst defensive right fielders, one of the worst defensive first basemen, and then a rotating door of guys at second base. So even when they were good, it wasn't like there was any continuity built up between them defensively. So you just had this quadrant of the field that was very bad defensively, and now you kind of split that up a little bit.
And hopefully that should help. Right, the cover-up is better this year, too, because you've got Soto in left. Now you've got Luis Robert in center, so he covers a lot more ground, than most center fielders.
You got Robert and you've got Lindor to help cover for Soto.
And you've got Semien to help cover for Polanco. And right now you're right. And now if Carson Benz gets the job, and he may start the season in AAA, frankly, but he was a former two-way player. The guy throws seeds out there in right field.
He's got a
Having an arm is like, whoa.
the biggest part about being a right fielder. So that makes a lot of sense here. The
Yeah.
Met, like you're now seeing the vision for the Mets coming through, and it's like, okay, I'm now getting what you were going for here.
Do we want to talk about Emmanuel Clase again, or should we just
Not really.
it just gets worse. It's just
every news story that comes out for him is just burying him further.
just so
It's just like a man that lost all hope realizes there was a bit more he could lose, because it's just like, okay, every story that comes out is like, okay, now not only are you going to be disbarred from baseball, they're going to like erase your stats from the game at this rate with each story that comes out.
yeah, you can Clase has no class. I think I wrote. So leave it at that.
To let people know he was throwing the games. It's wild how and it's now he's not even like, okay, you know what? He went into this full-throatedly. Like he was 100% on board with going with this. This wasn't like, oh, people got in his ear and the wrong people told him to do stuff. Right. No. He was 100% a part of the scheme here. Any sympathy I might have had for him is gone.
So before we get to your topic, which I think is a good one, when you're talking about home runs and Pittsburgh and Statcast, I wanted to note that out of market watching of Major League Baseball now, there's a package through ESPN for only $149 for the season, or $30 a month. And it lets you watch all out of market games. And while that seems, well, that's nice, I guess. You can have one place to go to. But the problem is you're not watching your team.
Right. And so, like, okay, you know what that's great for? All the restaurant and bars around the world that want to have baseball on TV and they don't want to have to think about what game they're putting on. That's who that's great for. Because people at home, we are some of the most dedicated baseball fans on this podcast. I'm not going to imagine there's too many more people out there, like when we're talking about scale at least, that are bigger baseball fans than you or I. And you and I look at this feature and go, oh, how many baseball games do I need to watch that aren't my own team? Like, right? Like, like who is this for?
Well, and the bar, listen, if you're in Brooklyn, or you're you're in Manhattan and you own a bar, you better have the Yankee game and the Mets on TVs in your bar, which means you're paying the cable package price anyways.
I love that MLB is trying. They're trying to make the game more accessible, but let's be realistic. The package that everybody wants is $150 for the year. I get all of my team's games.
All of your team, plus the $150 for all the out-of-market games. There's no way.
I get all of my team's games.
Okay.
I get all 160 for 150.
I like that. I don't think the cable operators are going to be.
No, the cable operators don't want that. But that's what it is. If MLB wants to put out a package that's actually going to move the needle and make baseball fans perk up and pay attention, it's got to be that, because that's the product people want. You offering me baseball games of teams I don't watch is not a product. It's not a service. It's just okay. Like, cool. I don't care.
Of course, when I wake you up from your dream, because that's all that is. I know that we would like it to be that way. I don't know if it'll ever get there. To try to undo this legacy system, I don't know how to do it. I don't have a suggestion. It's so far down the pike. It's hard to figure out how they could get them out of there.
Right. Because the cable networks will just refuse to host it if they ever try to set up something like that. And I don't know.
Yeah. So aside from other silly news items, and the Orioles signing Chris Bassett and the Rays signing Nick Martinez, I thought you really came onto something interesting when you started looking up. Okay, so we've got some players that have moved around this year, and you mentioned Brandon Lowe, I believe.
I got inspired from a YouTuber made the cut. He put out a video about 5 hitters, who are looking at having regressions this year. Obviously, we listed a bunch of different guys like Teoscar Hernandez, guys like Cal Raleigh. But the most interesting one that he talked about was Brandon Lowe, and not for a lot of the reasons that you thought, because a lot of the other guys were like, oh, their ground ball rate went up, oh, their hard hit ball weight rate went up. But one of the more interesting discussion points, at least referenced in terms of Brandon Lowe, was the parks that he was playing in. Because one of the things that we don't think about is, we think about like, oh, you play in your own home team stadium for 82 games. But what about like the other stadiums in your division? You play those teams a lot, and you're going to play in all of those stadiums probably between another 30 to 40 games. That's when you think about that, 120 of your games are going to be played in like 4 or 5 stadiums. It's a lot of your season that is taking place in a really small set of places. So when you look at a guy like Brandon Lowe, who moves over from the AL East, where if we're looking at where home runs are hit, they had some of the highest expected home run rates at their stadium. I think the Orioles were number 2. The Rays, because they were playing at George Steinbrenner Field, were number 7. The Blue Jays were tied for 10th. So you were playing at a lot of stadiums.
And the Yankees are good too. A good
right. The Yankees are up there too. Only the Red Sox. Fenway Field, interestingly, is a place where it's hard to hit home runs.
That's hard to believe that Fenway Park is not a home run park. Right?
It's interesting. That probably is a lot because of the monster, and it's also because of the teams. But because the Red Sox last year as a team didn't hit for a ton of power, actually. And so when the home team doesn't hit for a lot of power, that does negatively influence the amount of expected home runs at the stadium. But now, in terms of Brandon Lowe, he moves from playing the Rays, so he hit a bunch of home runs last year, but a third of them came when he was hitting in Camden Yards and he was hitting at George Steinbrenner Field. Now he moves to PNC Park, where he's playing 82 games in the stadium where it had the lowest expected home run rate of any stadium.
They index really under. They're 66 off 100. That's the worst place to hit homers.
I expect that to go up this year. Between signing guys like Lowe and Ozuna, the Pirates, their own power is going to go up. So in part, why there were so few expected home runs to be hit there is because the Pirates didn't have anybody on. The Pirates played 82 games there.
With guys who don't hit home runs.
Right. The Yankees.
81 games.
Right. The Yankees had one of the highest walk rates in the MLB. Yankee Stadium is the stadium where the most batters walk. That's not because umpires magically have a smaller zone when they go to Yankee Stadium. It's because a guy named Aaron Judge plays there.
Right. I also make the point that in the Yankee Stadium, because of the short right field porch, if Jazz Chisholm's coming up late in the game or
Cody
Bellinger, you might be thinking of walking those guys rather than letting beat you with a home run down the line.
Especially like one out, Cody Bellinger comes up in a tie game, you might walk him if nobody's on because you're like, yeah, I'm not going to let Cody Bellinger beat me on a pop-up to right field. And I guess shout out to Citi Field to being the most honest home run stadium in the MLB. It's the closest to average where basically, we see about the number of home runs we expect from the players that play there and the players that pitch there. So it'd be kind of interesting to see that for Citi Field as a stadium we always talk about being a not great place to hit.
And we saw the Royals have moved in the fences at Kauffman Stadium, and probably a good thing because they were an 83 index off 100, so they were
right. And especially, and look, we all know fans like seeing home runs and moving the fences in. People are like, how much does moving the fences in? You know what? 10 feet on the fences, especially with the way guys are hitting fly balls now, that could be a big difference on 10 feet because 10 less feet in the air when you're hitting these giant sky shots, all of a sudden balls that were falling just on the warning track. When you think about how many home runs we've seen fall on the warning track, balls just like guys catch right in front of the fence, you move that fence 10 feet in, all of those are home runs now.
And we see a fair amount of home runs that just crawl over the fence and barely make it anyway. So, you move them in 10 feet. Those are clear home runs without any chance of a catch.
Right, and now all of a sudden there's a whole new set of ones. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Royals jump up in their home run totals this year.
But you really got onto something, and I haven't spent a lot of time in this. You just sent me the file,
Right. It's something interesting. You can look it up on Statcast. It's just interesting.
Well, actually, it's baseball. Well, Baseball Savant Statcast, right?
Right. It's just interesting to think about the how the stadiums affect the players. If you're gonna, because we always talk about Coors Field being a stadium where it's the power. It's not so much the power, it's everything else. It's that when you hit balls in Coors Field, they just fly better. So you not only have more home runs, you have more doubles, you have more triples, you have more hits, you have more power because the ball flies there better. Not necessarily the ball flies further there.
Right. They actually, Coors Field it over indexes by 10%, but it's not anywhere near the top parks. And there are plenty of parks that actually have something like their home run ratio. But for every other stat, as you said, triple.
Right.
Double,
Chase Field. Chase Field is the field with the highest. It's a 218 for triples. It's the highest. It indexes higher than any other stadium for triples. That's in part because their outfield is insane and the ball kicks all over the place, and in part because also they have Corbin Carroll there and he's faster than light, and so he gets a bunch of triples throughout the season.
Right, right, and the Yankees, I think of the cavernous Yankee Stadium. They actually under-index for triples, as is the case at Citi Field, not a park with a lot of triples.
Right.
I don't really think of it that way.
You know what I also credit that to? Two of the slowest speed teams in the MLB.
That's true. That's good.
Right, but that's important because when the home teams are slower than Sin, who on the Mets and the Yankees are getting triples. So when the home team is playing 82 games there and they don't have guys that are fast, they're not going to get a lot of triples.
Well, and one of the guys I heard talked about is potentially he's a free agent. He's been a Met before, and he's a walking out at home plate, trying to run actually, and that's Wilmer Flores. So you talk about it. Does he ever?
He's not getting triples, that's for
yeah,
sure.
does Wilmer even have any career triples? Yeah, I'm sure he does, but
maybe one.
it does happen. So this week we're going to record a podcast with our friend Tom Stone, who
talking about
right.
weekly baseball and in his case daily baseball updates and what it's
That's
like.
impressive. Yeah, Tom.
He's a machine.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this beyond the box score and his daily blog, newsletter, basically highlights everything that happened the day before during the regular season. So he did it for not only all 162 games of the season for all the teams last year, he also did it for the playoffs and the World Series. I don't know when the guy sleeps because you wake up in the morning and he's got the night's recap right in there, and
it's like he's writing it as the night's ending.
So we look forward to having him. He'll be on our podcast next week. In the meantime, we're real close to actual Major League Baseball games being played with the ABS during spring training, and that's going to be interesting to watch to see how that works out.
Yeah, spring training is coming, but let's be honest, we're all looking forward to the WBC and some real baseball coming up soon.
We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks.